Hello everyone. Now let's look at the important outputs of the analysis phase known as analysis artifacts. An artifact is simply a document or model created during software development. These artifacts help developers understand the system before moving to the design stage. There are two major analysis artifacts. One is analysis class, another one is use case realizations. The first is analysis class. These represent the important entities or concepts in the business domain. For example, in a hospital management system, entities such as patient, doctor, appointment, and medicine can be considered analysis classes because they represent real-world objects. The second artifact is use case realization. These illustrate how instance of the analysis class can interact to realize the system behavior specified by use case. This interaction is captured in the use case realization. These artifacts give developers a clear understanding of how the system should behave. This is the workflow of analysis modeling. So the process begins after gathering the user requirements. The analyst carefully studies these requirements to understand what the customer expects from the system. Next, the important business entities are identified and represented as analysis classes. After identifying the classes, the interactions between these classes are analyzed. This helps us understand how different parts of the system work together to complete a task. Finally, all these classes and their interactions are combined to form the analysis model. In simple terms, this workflow converts user requirements into a structured model that developers can use during the design phase. A good analysis model reduces misunderstandings and helps build better software. So to create a good analysis model, developers follow some important guidelines called rules of thumb. So the first rule is to use the vocabulary of business domain. The class names and terms used in the model should be familiar to the users and customers. The second rule is that every model should explain an important part of the system behavior. Every diagram should have a clear purpose. The third rule is focus on big picture. During analysis, we should understand the overall functionality instead of worrying about programming details. Another important rule is to clearly distinguish between the problem domain and the solution domain. Analysis focuses on understanding the problem and identifying what the system should do, while the design phase decides how the system will be implemented. Finally, developers should minimize coupling and maximize the cohesion. Low coupling means classes depend less on each other, making the software easier to modify. High cohesion means each class performs one well-defined responsibility, making the system more organized and maintainable. So let's continue with the few more important guidelines. One important concept is inheritance. We should use inheritance only when there is a natural relationship between classes. For example, both car and bus can inherit from a common class called vehicle. However, inheritance should never be used simply to reuse the code because it can make the design unnecessarily complex. So another important question every developer should ask is this model useful to all the stakeholders? Stakeholders includes customers, developers, testers, project managers, and anyone involved in the software projects. If the model is difficult to understand, it needs improvement. The final and most important rule is keep the model simple. A simple model is easier to understand, easier to maintain, and easier to modify when requirements change. Remember, the best analysis model is not the one with the most diagrams, but the one that clearly represents the system requirements. So always aim for clarity, simplicity, and characters while creating analysis models. So today we learned about the analysis artifacts, the workflow of analysis modeling, and the important rules for creating effective analysis models. These concepts help software developers understand user requirements clearly and create a strong foundation for the design and implementation phases. Thank you.